Hello and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth. I would like to take a moment to remind you that if you are interested, please check out my radio show and the other shows on the Inception Radio Network, which there is a link to in the description box of my videos. My show, the Stench of Truth Radio, airs on Fridays from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and I am almost always live, although I do have a couple of recorded shows that are coming up this month. So if you're interested in talk radio about conspiracy, paranormal, parapolitical, hidden history, cover-ups, all those sorts of things, give my show a look if you haven't done so yet. And of course, the older shows are archived at Inception Radio Network. You just have to register there, which is free, and you can get access to them once they're put up into the archive. They also are available on iTunes as podcasts, and you can go to iTunes, search podcasts for The Stench of Truth, and you can get all of my shows. I'm coming up on 1 year of doing these, so there's a lot of material there for people who are interested in looking into that. I just wanted to remind you, and also to say thank you to my friend Michelle, aka Vocal Brush, who provides me with the music that goes along with the show. So for those of you who do listen to the show, if you like the music that's on there, and some people have said that they like the music a lot and have asked me where it comes from, well, it comes from Vocal Brush, who is someone I know through YouTube. And if you would like to send some thanks her way, stop over to her channel or check her out on Facebook, and I'm sure she'd be very happy to hear that you like her music. So enough said on that. Now I wanted to talk about a couple of issues today, and one is about the strike that occurred in the United Kingdom. And I'm just going to read this. This is from Press TV. And it won't take very long. It is a wrap-up of the public sector strike in Britain on Wednesday. This was a one-day strike. Despite the claims by Prime Minister David Cameron, who said the action, quote, looks like something of a damp squib, end quote, the Department for Education announced 62% of England's 21,476 schools closed. The ratio of closures was 98% for Scotland, as only 33 out of 2,700 state schools were open, while in Wales, 86% of the schools, equal to more than 1,500 out of 1,776, were shut. In Northern Ireland, 2 out of 3 schools out of a total 1,200 were closed. This comes as in England, another 14% of schools were also partially closed. The walkouts also hit the ambulance service hard, forcing the London ambulance service to seek police help to answer emergency calls. The blow was not that seriously felt in NHS, as some 7,000 of 30,000 routine operations were cancelled or delayed. No bus or train service was available in Northern Ireland, while Heathrow and Gatwick airports kept their international flights operating almost as good as before. Yet the UK border agency staff did make their voices heard, as 1/3 of border control points were affected. The Immigration Services Union said 80 to 90% of immigration officers walked out, with only 1 in 23 personnel in Calais appearing for work. As for local authorities, almost 1/3 of staff, 670,000 of 2.1 million in England and Wales took strike action. So this was a massive, massive action in the UK. And it appears as though it came and went as a blip on the radar screen when it happened on Wednesday. But this is a huge potential, because this is a massive action of labor, okay? And with the recent addition in the United States of labor participation and backing of the various Occupy movements in this country, we could start to see some gathering momentum for general strikes here. And you have to realize that the general strike has more than a political statement to make. It affects a lot of things down through the chain. Not only the principal place where the people who work, but also all down through the chain of connections. Okay, so it is vastly effective in promoting an ideology, whatever that ideology happens to be. And in this case, for the UK, it was to protest the draconian austerity budget that the government is trying to pass, which would eliminate more government workers, which would, take away social services and do a lot of things to disrupt pensions and, their version of Social Security and all these sorts of things, which are just the, what would you say? They're like the bank's demands as ransom payments for the continued bailout of banks. And then you can look over further a little bit into Europe itself and see that the EU supposed sovereign debt crisis is still a major issue, but is not really being talked about a lot. Of course, the Federal Reserve is involved in this, and some have questioned that involvement and whether or not it should be happening at all, let alone the level to which it is. And it is quite probable that the Fed is propping up quite a bit in Europe, because we know already from released information in a partial audit that was done of the Federal Reserve during the height of the economic crisis that they did in fact lend money to foreign banks. Now, if it is so that the Fed is getting more involved in the EU in order to attempt to stabilize it, then I still have to ask the question that I asked back then. Why is the Federal Reserve not doing anything to stabilize fucking communities in this country? If we're going to have a central bank that is supposedly the central bank of the United States, why is it not serving the purposes of the fucking United States? Why is it not stabilizing municipalities? Why is it not covering bonds of municipal governments or state governments to allow them to overcome their fiscal burdens? Why is it not bailing out, cities and municipalities that are on the verge of bankruptcy? Well, quite clearly, it is because the Federal Reserve is not a central bank that has anything to do with the United States. It is merely a central bank in the scheme of central banks around the world. And in fact, as everybody who listens to this or watches me on YouTube knows, the Federal Reserve is not a federal agency, is not part of the government at all. It is a completely privately owned central bank, which is run by the member banks thereof. They own stock in it, and they decide what and to what level the Federal Reserve will act. And there is absolutely no intention of doing anything in any country around the world, in any kind of movement, besides what we see from the people themselves, to attempt to address the massive income inequality that is present everywhere in the world, but is most prominent here in the United States. And even though the lying, scammed up numbers that they've just released claim that unemployment dropped to below 9% to 8.6 with an additional 120,000 jobs, I contend that the real unemployment rate is in the mid-20s, and if it did go down at all, which I doubt, it is still in the mid-20s. This is Depression-era level unemployment, and they are covering it up on purpose. Now, the EU crisis is not a sovereign debt crisis. It is a bank debt crisis. It is the same exact thing that we went through in this country and are still going through now with the continued propping up of private banks by central government banks, which are not even owned by the central government. So it is banks supporting banks and then getting bailed out by the banks or by the treasuries of the governments involved. And most likely both in every case, which is what we had here. Now, what is to be done? Well, the only thing that should be done, in my view, is to tell the banks to go fuck themselves. And to die a hideous fucking death. And then you dissect the fucking steaming corpse and look in there and find out how much fraud, malfeasance, and theft that you can fucking find. And then you hunt down every motherfucker who put together every collateralized debt obligation, every motherfucking derivative, and every mortgage-backed fucking security, and you drag those fuckers into a fucking courtroom and you sentence them to fucking prison. Hard time. And that will be the only way that you can send a message to these banks that we are not going to be the slaves of the money power anymore. And if you act in this manner, you are not going to get away with it. Of course, this is not going to happen because the country is run largely by the banking institutions and the world itself. And for those of you who are still worried about the New World Order, as I've said before, there's no need for political union. There's no need for a North American Union. There is no need for any of these things. With the interlocking trade pacts that we have with all of these other countries and the interlocking nature of the central banking institutions around the world, there is no need for a political union. Everything is run by that, the financial organizations. They control the flow of money, they control the supply lines, and they run everything. There's no need for political union. So we already have the New World Order. It's already here. It won, it's in place, and it's running right now. Now the only way that you can fight back against this is to unite against these banks. And I think that's where the general strike comes in. Because what you do whenever you have general strike with a lot of people who are actively engaged, if you can engage millions to go out of work, you stop production, you stop consumer spending, you stop retail sales, you stop deposits into banks, you stop payouts, you stop all of these things that eventually hit these banks who are teetering on the fucking brink right now. So it's my hope that the various Occupy movements will unite with labor and will decide that general strikes are the way to go. That walking out for a day maybe to start, for a whole week, and you will cause banks to fucking collapse because they are going day to day just like a lot of people in this country and around the world are going day to day, not knowing whether they're going to lose their house or their job or be able to make ends meet or even eat for a day. But in one instance, we're talking about people, actual flesh and blood people. In the other, we're talking about a fucking parasite that needs to fucking die. And we have the means to do that. And I hope that we move in that direction, towards that general strike, and towards a more militant mobilization of labor in this country. And for those of you who are still stuck on this idiotic notion of looking at things through socialist or communist or whatever kind of, shades or eyeglasses you want to wear to try to categorize all this stuff, all of that is pointless. Okay? I don't care who's in there and what they're talking about. I don't care if they're talking about hardcore Soviet communism. If their eyes are on busting these banks and busting their stranglehold on our country, then I'm behind them. I don't care what they're talking about. We can debate political solutions after we have broken the fucking shackles that these banks have put on us. We can't do anything while we're still locked in the manacles that the banks have us under. And talking about political ideologies at this point is pointless. Because you can't do anything until you smash the fucking thieves and robbers. And you break the fucking chains of bondage. That's the simple fact. The UK had a very successful one-day strike. I hope they continue. I hope that they get bigger. I hope that the strikes go longer until finally the governments get the message. We are not going to bail out the fucking banks on the backs of the fucking people anymore. We do not have sovereign debt crises. We have bank crises, and the banks need to fucking fold. And I say, let them fucking die. Thank you. Good day.